Hey guys, what's up? It's munclesonkey and welcome to another top 10 video. In this video we're going to be going over the top 10 most useful skills for you to train, and before we actually get started in the video, I want to clarify that this video is about your account only. So certain skills such as mining and woodcutting, yes, I realize the game wouldn't be very great if there was like no ore or logs in the game, so someone has to do it, but for your account alone it's not really all that useful since all you're doing is mining for the sake of training mining or for the sake of getting 99, and it's not really benefiting your overall account in any way. So for the most part, any skill that's like that where you really just train it for the sake of training the skill will not be included, and the skills have to benefit your account in some other way or have to benefit some other skills along with you just training that particular skill. Number 10 on the list is crafting. Crafting actually has a lot of smaller uses. There's a lot of items in the game that you can craft that are going to benefit your account. A couple examples that I can give of that are player-owned ports armor, even though some of those armors additionally require smithing or rune crafting instead of crafting, or you can make urns which benefit other skills, granting you faster XP, and skills such as woodcutting or cooking or fishing. So those are really nice, and there's a few miscellaneous items such as the blood necklace. For example, you can buy a blood necklace shard and then attach that to a fury or one of the Dungeoneering amulets, and that makes a blood necklace, and that requires like 85 crafting, somewhere around that level. There's just a whole bunch of miscellaneous things that you can make with creating crafting that are going to be really helpful. The urns is probably the main one because that significantly increases your XP when training those skills which you can use urns in, but overall crafting is just a really handy skill to get up, even though it is quite expensive, so that's the major problem with crafting itself. Number 9 is Divination. One thing that I've found is a lot of people have been bashing Divination, saying it's not really all that useful for a skill, when it's really, in my opinion, by far the most useful gathering skill in the game. There's so many things that you are going to use Divination for constantly on a daily basis that you might not even realize. It's not just trading the skill, and yeah, the skill is slow, and it's not all that interesting to train for the most part in most people's minds. However, you are going to be using it a lot. One of the main things that you are going to be using Divination for is these divine locations that you can gather from every day, granting you some nice XP and money, and it doesn't take very long to do, so it's really worth it if you can gather from these divine locations. You can also go to World 48 or World 2 during reset time, midnight British time, and people will lay down divine locations so that you can harvest from them. There's also some other really nice factors of Divination, one of them being the sign of the porters, so you can bank stuff such as black dragon hides if you're killing black dragons, or even banking ores if you're mining. It works with a whole bunch of different things. And additionally, when you get into PVM, stuff like the sign of life and the sign of item protection are things that you're going to use all the time and might not even realize how useful they really are. Number 8 on the list is construction, and I will be the first to admit to you, construction does not have a whole lot of uses. However, the uses that it does have, you will probably use a lot. I cannot count how many times I have used my portal room or in my house, or my glory amulet that I have on the wall in my house, and that's not even counting the gilded altar, which is in most people's opinion the best way to train prayer, although the elf city method is pretty legit as well. But for the most part, you're going to be doing all of your prayer on your construction altars, so that's going to be really helpful to get up to 75. And additionally, the portal room, I use the Canifis portal myself all the time. It used to be extremely handy back in the day for Barrows runs and such. Maybe not so much anymore, however, it's still pretty nice to get there in case you don't want a lodestone. Another thing is, it's just nice to have your house portal in a location that might be a little bit difficult to get to. One example that I can think of is when I was a lower Slayer level, I had my house in Palvnum Niche, and then I used that to get to my Slayer Master, and it was a lot faster than going through the desert. So even though there's not a whole lot of uses, the uses are going to be something that you'll get a lot of help out of. Number 7 is Herblore, and Herblore really only becomes incredibly needed when you get to the higher Herblore levels, and then you can make things such as the super anti-fires, the extreme potions, and the overloads. It's maybe not so useful at the lower levels when creating most types of potions is going to lose you money, and you're probably better off just buying them off of the Grand Exchange. But once you do go up into overloads and the extreme potions, and also additionally the super anti-fires, can't overlook those. They are incredibly useful. These are a must-have for PVM, and you'll be using them all the time. Really, anytime you're in combat, you should be using some type of potion. So Herblore is something that you will get tons and tons of use out of. Even if you're not a combat-oriented player, there's still a few potions, such as the Juju farming potions or the perfect Juju potions that came out recently that can benefit you with skilling as well. So there's something for everyone when it comes to Herblore, and it's also nice that you have potions to boost your stats for even stuff like opening effigies. Number 6 on the list is prayer, and I did decide to put prayer above Herblore, and admittedly for both of these you're going to be using Herblore and prayer all the time, or at least using potions and using specific prayers, for doing your Slayer, doing your bossing, really any type of combat. And even though Herblore has some additional uses, such as non-combat uses, the thing that pushed prayer above Herblore for me is because, for one, prayer is a lot cheaper to train than Herblore is, and for two, you will use your prayer everywhere you go. You might not necessarily need to use your overloads everywhere. You might only decide to use overloads on bosses. However, every single Slayer task, every single monster you train on, you're probably going to be using Soul Split and Turmoil, and they're also a lot cheaper to use than the overloads or even some of the higher boosting potions as well. So prayer is just incredibly useful and absolutely a must-have. This is typically the #1 thing that I recommend people purchase when they make their first decent amount of money. Number 5 on the list is summoning, and the reason why summoning is so high in terms of usefulness is there's just so many things that you can do with summoning. It's an incredibly useful skill, and not just for combat either. Typically when you think of prayer or Herblore, you're mostly just using those to boost combat. Summoning, you're going to use this absolutely everywhere. You will use it for skilling, for example summoning lava titans to boost your mining, or summoning spirit grax to do nature rune running, and there's lots of other familiars that are going to help out with skilling as well. And then when you are in combat, as you get up into those higher summoning familiars and you unlock stuff like the Yak or the Steel Titan, or even some of the Nihil pouches, you'll find yourself using these everywhere. Every single time you're in combat, you're going to have your familiar out, and it's going to be helping you bank items or store items or kill enemies faster. And I cannot stress how important it is to get that summoning level up, and as you begin to unlock those higher level familiars that are even more useful, you'll be very, very thankful for it. Number 4 on the list is Slayer, and yes, even though I do have maybe a very large Slayer bias, there is a reason why I decided to put Slayer so high, and that's because you train so many different things throughout Slayer. You can train up all of your combat stats, you can additionally make a lot of money, which can go towards training your Bible skills such as Herblore and Prayer, so you can train those almost passively through Slayer because you do have to make money from those skills, and you will be making quite a bit of money through Slayer. And additionally, you get charms for summoning. So the reason why Slayer is so high is it's just such a well-rounded skill that has so many benefits to it in terms of training other skills, and it's also one of the least grindy skills in game because about every half an hour you go to kill a different type of monster. And eventually, as you get up into the really high echelon of Slayer targets and have a really high Slayer level, it's going to slow down a lot because you won't be unlocking new Slayer monsters and you won't be unlocking new Slayer monsters. However, for the most part, getting up through the Slayer grind is nice because you unlock a whole ton of different monsters and you're going to be killing a lot of different tasks, and overall it's a very varied experience, which is one of the reasons why I love it so much. Number 3 on the list is Dungeoneering, and although it pained me quite a bit to put Dungeoneering above Slayer, the one thing that I cannot deny in terms of a skill that rewards other skills so much, Dungeoneering has to be #1 in terms of that. It's not going to be #1 on this list, but the reason why it's so high on this list is because you train all your other skills in Dungeoneering. You need all of your other skills to open up skill doors, and you will get XP from them, and it's just so intricate in terms of there's so much stuff to craft, there's so much stuff to do, there's so many puzzle rooms to learn a whole ton of different monsters that have different weaknesses. There's a lot to Dungeoneering, and even though not all of this is directly going to benefit your other skills, there's also a ton of rewards from Dungeoneering. It's not just the chaotic stuff like the Scroll of Life to save you seeds or the Charming Imp to pick up your charms while you're in combat. This stuff is things that are just absolutely needed for your RS experience in the long run and are going to help you out so much, and they're permanent reward unlocks as well. So Dungeoneering is the #1 thing that you should really prioritize if you're stuck and if you're thinking, what is something I can really do to benefit my account overall? I would recommend to get into DG. It is quite a steep learning curve. It's not easy to get immediately into it and to be good at it, but eventually once you get used to Dungeoneering, it's a very rewarding experience and one that you probably will not regret doing. Number 2 on this list is melee and ranged combat, and even though melee and range are not even close to the same thing, they both work towards the same purpose. You are using both of them to kill monsters, and really exclusively killing monsters and not really a whole lot else. And yes, this counts as something that's very varied because you can kill many different types of monsters using your melee and ranged styles, and you will, especially if you're looking towards training your other skills, because even though I didn't want to prioritize skills that are only working towards money making, and admittedly a lot of combat is towards money making, there's so much of the game itself that is based around combat, especially when you're getting into the end game, a lot of bosses and stuff, and most of the end game content that you're going to run into is combat driven and combat related, and it can be a lot of fun, but unfortunately you have to be good at combat and you have to have good gear and such in order to do some of this end game content. What's the best way to do that? What are the best ways to make money in the game? For the most part, they are combat related, and also so many other skills tie into this, such as Slayer, Summoning, Prayer. They all work towards one common goal, which is the killing of monsters in combat. Alright, so it didn't take very long for me to figure out what the number one skill on this list would be. There's really not much doubt in my mind that the number one skill in the game has to be firemaking. There's just so many useful things about firemaking, especially the fact that you can AFK with it and then there's an XP bonus, and it all leads toward a very enjoyable experience, and you can get a lot of XP and work towards that really cool 99 firemaking cape as well. I've just been informed that the number one ranking of the most useful skill in RS is actually not firemaking, it's magic instead. And the reason why magic is so useful and it comes up at the real number one spot is because not only do you get to do combat with magic, just like you do with range or melee, but there's also a lot of other uses, alchemy being one of them, but only one of the very small amount of a huge plethora of uses for magic. And one thing that is really cool about magic is we have an entire spellbook, the Lunar spellbook, completely dedicated to non-combat spells, and there's a whole lot of really useful stuff on there, especially if you do the Livid Farm and unlock some of those spells such as remote farming or teleport to Trollheim that can really help you out while doing your farm runs, for example. And there's a whole lot of really interesting stuff on that magic spellbook as well that is super helpful, along with the combat bonuses that you get. That's about it for this top 10 video. Thank you guys for watching, and also don't forget to leave your suggestions for the next one, and you will be given credit to in the video if your suggestion is chosen, as well as leaving a like, and feel free to check out the rest of the top 10 videos, which are linked in the description below. I'm going to be doing some PVM, working on that Condemned to PVM series. It's going to be a lot of fun, and I'll see you guys tomorrow with the next video. Farewell.